Hi, welcome back YouTubers to my channel of an everyday life of an Aspie. If you're new to my channel, I welcome you all. I'm Aspie. I'm all about creating mental health and awareness and sharing my life stories with Aspergers syndrome, OCD and everything else in between of that, and hopefully saying this that we can journey this journey together. As we know, we're nearing into Christmas, and I thought of the uptake, even though it's supposed to be Christmas related of some of the vlogs, I thought sure, why not? I need to kickstart some of the vlogs that I'll be behind, hopefully, right now, based on the health and awareness related topics and whatever else in between it. And I'm hoping in saying this that some of them will educate you or inform you of certain different conditions that I may bring out, and hopefully some of these are educating you or what have you. Smash the like button or comment below just to let me know, so that hopefully I can just continue to advocate and support you guys for the ones that may be on the autism spectrum disorder, especially because that's where I want to lie right now. So as we know, basically, as I said, that while I'm away, I'm going to try and bring out as many videos as I can. I'll probably be back from Christmas period first and foremost with the videos that I'm going to upload while I'm away. So it's give and take, hopefully, in saying this though while I'm away. But don't forever fret, as I always say, because you know I'll be out fluttering around maybe on the groups that I'm in. Even though if people may not see me active in some of the groups, please bear with me, because obviously I'm in so many groups right now and a form of support. I'm trying to stretch as far as I can with my support, be it, you know, with my positive key message or whatever it may be. And sometimes I'm saying that, you know, I am not trying to, you know, avoid any of yous or ignore yous, but if you guys really need someone to talk to, feel free, if you feel confident enough, to private message me on AspieAnswers just to talk to me or what have you, and I'll see what I can do as a form of a listening ear, or if you needed some form of opinion. Well, in saying this now, this one's going to be obviously a health related one of where my passionate lies, obviously health science and awareness and whatever it may bring to you. This one's going to be about how Asperger's syndrome and high functioning autism is different. Forgive me guys of the ones that are on the autistic community. Yes, I was trying to abolish the word high functioning autism, as we agreed that it shouldn't be used. I know there are other clinical terms here, however, just to bear in mind of what to label ourselves, be it autistic, whatever it may be, or some other clinical diagnosis that's wrapped in that umbrella term of the autism spectrum disorder, obviously, because obviously in this saying this that there has been a lot of confusion and misunderstanding on it. So that's why I'm here today, hopefully to address these, you know, terms and how they're different and everything else in between this and saying this. And there will be a few maybe differences as well as similarities, but I'm just hoping to try and stick with the differences, so bear with me. But then again, it will come out also in saying this, maybe some similarities as well based on this, as well as some of the other research. And as a keynote, as a disclaimer, as always, I am no medical doctor. I'm just speaking from experience. So if you see any signs and symptoms that are from the present or past videos that I have addressed to you all, please seek professional help for yourself or your loved one, or seek an opinion for yourself and loved one, because I don't forever condone self-harm. So as I know that sometimes we need to try and clinically spot the problem or the diagnosis quick smart, but sometimes, as I said, some of the diagnoses or symptoms, you know, intertwine with each other, and we need to hopefully, in saying this, be aware we can spot it and have some form of background knowledge or experience it. Even though, like I said, I am trying to speak it from experience. So let's begin this before I run out of time. As you know, once your child receives a diagnosis, especially when they're young, basically when you're really needing to know the answers to everyday problems, that, you know, you will have many questions underlying a particular symptom or diagnosis, be it if your child is autistic or dyslexic or diabetic, whatever it may be, that, you know, we tend to question, where does it stop, or where can we turn to? Because I know for a fact, despite the limited information we have here in New Zealand based on certain things on Asperger's syndrome and autism, some of it also, just to bear in mind, I'll relate to UK, US and some other countries that have, you know, really gone into this, you know, research too. But the one question that you may have on your mind is, how is AS different and similar to other autism spectrum disorders? Right? So, as we know, Asperger's syndrome exists as part of the autism spectrum, but differs in early developmental of language from classic autism and other pervasive developmental disorders. After the diagnosis is given of an autism spectrum disorder, however, it's important to explain and understand both the similarities and differences between the disorders on the spectrum, as I said. Asperger's syndrome and high-functioning autism are often referred to as the same diagnosis. While they currently exist pretty much as two separate diagnoses, there is an ongoing debate, however, about whether this is necessary, basically, to keep it in that spectrum disorder or what have you. It's possible that in the near future that they may combine it into the one category. Individuals with high-functioning autism and Asperger's syndrome have average or above average intelligence, but may struggle with issues related to their social interaction and communication with their peers. The diagnosis of either high-functioning autism or Asperger's syndrome, however, can oftentimes will feel frustrating for a parent as well as the child, as it may seem that these terms aren't clearly defined. It's essential to remember that both AS and HFA do present themselves largely in the same way, and as a result may be treated in a similar way too. The primary difference, however, is that a diagnosis of HFA requires that in early development the child may have delayed language, whereas in AS the child did not show a significant delay in the language development. But then you've got to remember that sometimes, when it comes down to it, for a child that has Asperger's syndrome that doesn't show a delay in language, basically, will most likely show most of the time of that language delay, but not quite as big as the people on the other end of the scale that is, has the classic autism or what have you, which I'll use classic autism. If you would like me to use that instead of high functioning autism, let me know in the comments below, please, for the ones that maybe are autistic, because I want to try and make sure that I'm not trying to sound as if I'm judgmental or anything like this, so bear with me, guys. But anyway, on the other hand, however, for people with classic autism, I'll put it, or people with autism in general, there will be a massive delay in speech. A matter of fact, real big delays in speech. And usually when this happens, the parents tend to lose hope or question to themselves to when will their child ever speak again. People start assuming that they can talk and have good verbal skills, that they're not autistic and isn't on the spectrum. And that's not always 100% true here. Because you know for a fact that you can have Asperger's syndrome, which is an autism spectrum disorder, and yet you still have really good verbal skills, and as well as verbal vocabulary, just like any normal neurotypical child. Okay, another one is basically number 2. Asperger's syndrome, there'll be no delay in cognitive abilities such as your math, music, and some other form of interest that, or subject matter that kids got underlie in classroom for these ones with Asperger's syndrome. Some people with Asperger's syndrome may likely to excel in math and music, not always. They may excel in other areas because of the way their brain is wired and obviously controls the everyday memory versus everything else that functions in the brain. But as I said before, I'm going to hopefully find some recorded document based on autism brain versus the neurotypical brain, so that we can actually know and understand how the brain works between each of this. And also, in saying this, with their excelling in cognitive abilities of this, is that there is no delay, and sometimes they'll pick it up very early on about music, maths, and whatever else. And also in saying this, with this cognitive display of this, on the other hand, basically, people with classic autism, these cognitive abilities, again, will be a real big delay in education. Alright, number 3, last but not least, hopefully, I'm trying to figure out how many more I can actually differentiate, but we'll see once I explain this a bit more. Okay, last but not least here is people with Asperger's syndrome usually have above average or average, quite an average high IQ level, which will mean that they will excel in those areas that I just explained, be it math, science, music, etc, etc. It may also mean while they're above average kind of IQ levels, again, due to the wiring of the brain, they'll be solely obsessed, solely interested in that one particular area that they're good at. Sometimes it will be hard for some people on that spectrum, maybe, I could be wrong, that has Asperger's syndrome, to take away themselves from that interest and focus on something of their weaknesses. Bear with me. Please comment below if I'm wrong to open this discussion here. Also, in saying this again, autistics are like that as well. A low, probably, spectrum of it too. But in saying this, there has been a general agreement that autism is as defined by Leo Kanner and the Autistic Psychopathy, the original descriptive term of Hans Asperger, who actually did define Asperger's, which was later changed to, obviously, the term Asperger's syndrome by Lorna Wing. That these two conditions within range of these disorders known as pervasive developmental disorders, as I said before, or autism spectrum disorders. I can't stress that enough. In 1994, however, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders provided diagnostic criteria for Asperger's syndrome. The opinion in the authors of this manual, however, what was then revised in 2000 at a later date, which has been, I think, is the one of the, this mental disorder diagnostic and statistical manual of this diagnostic disorder, excuse me, was that Asperger's syndrome could be differentiated from autism by examination of the child's earlier developmental stages as they grow up. The clinical profile of a child with Asperger's syndrome, however, is also less likely to include these motor mannerisms and preoccupation with parts of objects as occurs in autism, but the child can have a circumscribed interest that consumes a great deal of their time assuming information and facts. They also noted that the profile of social skills in children with autism includes self-isolation or rigid social approaches with their, routines and whatnot. While in Asperger's syndrome, there can be a motivation to socialize, but this is achieved in a highly eccentric, one-sided, verbalized, and instinctive manner. Should the child's profile of abilities and developmental history be consistent with the criteria for both of this, autism and Asperger's syndrome, the authors of the DSM state that a diagnosis of autism should take precedence. The diagnostic criteria in the DSM manual, which provides a differentiation between autism and Asperger's syndrome, however, has been examined by several research studies over the last 5 years. Or even more so, more than 5 years now, because as I said before, this is a new diagnosis here. There has been some criticism from the clinicians and research from that criteria that doesn't identify the disorder that Hans Asperger originally described it as. The 4 cases he has described in his original paper would be diagnosed according to DSM criteria as having autism, not Asperger's syndrome. This is from a research paper. Miller and Osnoff 1997 stated this. If one was to use the DSM criteria, Asperger's syndrome would be a very rare condition. Research has also been conducted and shown on whether delayed language in children with autism can accurately predict later on clinical symptoms. The 3 studies have cast these considerable doubt over the use of early language delay as a differential criterion between autism and Asperger's syndrome. This is from basically Isamager, Pryor, Lakem, Wing, Gold, and Wellham 1998, as well as Dickerson, Mize, and Calhoun 2001. of this research I've done. Any differences in language ability that are apparent in the preschool years between child with autism and Asperger's syndrome, however, has largely disappeared by early adolescence. There is general agreement that children with Asperger's syndrome may not show any conspicuous cognitive delay in early childhood, as I said. Indeed, some quite precocious or talented in terms of learning to read, numerical abilities, and in some aspects of their constructive and play and memory. Children with autism, however, can be recognized as having developmental delay in their cognitive abilities from infancy and diagnosed as young as 18 months of age, within a mean age of diagnosis of 5 years, or even to 3 years usually. Children with Asperger's syndrome, however, are often not diagnosed until after they start school, with the mean age of diagnosis of 11 years. However, the signs of Asperger's syndrome in very young children may be more subtle and are easily camouflaged at home and at school. On the reflection on that, parents, especially mothers, and teachers have often been concerned about some aspects of child's cognitive development, in particular their social reasoning, but their concerns may have been intuitive and difficult to describe to clinicians, as not until the child is expected to show more advanced cognitive skills and abilities for this formal assessment to indicate significant delay or any unusual profile in this cognitive development in children. There has been research comparing the cognitive profile of adolescents with autism and Asperger's syndrome. The studies have examined the cognitive profile of what may be called, as I said before, high-functioning autism. That is, children with a diagnosis of autism with an intelligent quotient in the normal range, i.e. above 70. The term high-functioning autism has been used in the past to describe children who had these classic signs of autism in early childhood. But then, moreover, as they have developed formal testing of their cognitive abilities, indicated a greater degree of intellectual ability, with greater social and adaptive behavior skills than are usual with children with autism. Their clinical outcome was better than expected. The cognitive abilities this group of children were then compared to the cognitive profile of children with Asperger's syndrome, who did not have a history of early cognitive or language delay. The results of the research hasn't been established as distinct and consistent profile for each of these groups, however. One group of researchers based at Yale University in the United States have suggested on the basis of their research studies that the neuropsychological profiles of children with Asperger's syndrome and high-functioning autism, however, are different. However, research by other scientists examining these diagnostic differentiations using neuropsychological testing hasn't identified a distinct profile that discriminates between the two groups. The DSM criteria refers to the children with Asperger's syndrome as having, in comparison to children with autism, no clinically significant delay in age-appropriate self-help skills and adaptive behaviors. Clinical experience, however, indicates that parents, especially mothers of children and adolescents with Asperger's syndrome, often have to provide verbal reminders and advice regarding self-help and daily living skills. This can range from problems with dexterity, affecting activities such as learning to tie shoelaces, to reminders regarding personal hygiene, dress sense, and time management. Clinicians have also recognized significant problems with adaptive behavior, especially with regard to anger management, anxiety, and mood. This is referred to in the paper from Colin Atwood in 2002. Clinical experience and research has also confirmed that in terms of the child's behavioral profile, children and adults with high-functioning autism and Asperger's syndrome have a very similar presentation. Collections have noted that as the clinical picture of the pervasive developmental disorders or autism spectrum has, however, changed over time. A child may receive a diagnosis of severe autism or high-functioning autism at one point in their developmental history and Asperger's syndrome at a later stage. There is also the opinion that among most clinicians that, contrary to the DSM, if a child meets criteria for both autism and Asperger's syndrome, the child is given a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. A dilemma for the clinician is whether a particular diagnosis enables the child to have access to the government services that they really need to accommodate that need. In some countries, a child may only have support in the classroom, or the parents may receive government allowances or medical insurance coverage if the child has a diagnosis of autism. Clinicians may report with the diagnosis of autism rather than the more accurate diagnosis of Autism Aspergers syndrome. However, this is particularly relevant when which one considers the epidemiological research that has suggested that 1 person in 250 has Aspergers syndrome. Using the criteria being adopted by clinicians, government and non-government agencies, especially education and health departments, have usually not been funded for such an incident and are reluctant to probably open these floodgates. So, on the other hand, you may be questioning, since I've done the differences, how is Aspergers syndrome similar to classic autism? According to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, children with Aspergers syndrome find it difficult to identify and express their feelings, just like those with high-functioning autism. But then everybody's different on the scale. I'm starting to learn more about this. They find it challenging to connect with others. Often they don't hold the eye contact and have trouble reading other people's faces and gestures. And I'll link up this in the description below, what I'm meaning here of this, because obviously it is quite common. Many children with AS flap their hands, a behaviour often associated with classic autism, speak without much emotion, or have otherwise unusual speech patterns, needs to follow schedules rigidly, and are intensely, even obsessively interested in only one specific subject, so much that they become veritable experts in that field. They also exhibit sensitivities to various other stimuli from the classic ones of taste, sound, clothing, and the like. Again, another one is, how do Asperger's syndrome, high-functioning autism diagnosis differ from the classic autism? Very good question. Compared with classic autism, children with Asperger's syndrome, high-functioning autism have IQs that falls in the normal or even superior range, as I discussed earlier. To many, they may seem just like any other children, but this is not the case. This is not quite the case. Children with Asperger's syndrome are socially awkward in a manner that's not easily understood. This explains why healthcare providers may miss seeing Asperger's syndrome or high-functioning autism symptoms in their young patients, or even to the point that they may misdiagnose it completely. In the later onset of complex social skills such as peer interaction, this will also explain why some parents don't seek help until much later compared to those kids that display a more profound or more obvious set of symptoms from a very young age. So in conclusion, to end this, having received the literature that I have, received and also researched, I have been able to answer some of the question that is there a difference between Asperger's syndrome and high-functioning autism. To answer this, the reply is that the research and clinical experience team would suggest that there is no clear evidence that they are different disorders. Their similarities are greater than their differences. We appear to be taking the tip, obviously for some of the researchers, they appear to be taking, particularly in Europe and Australia, a dimensional view of autism and Asperger's syndrome, rather than just a categorical approach. At present, both terms can be used interchangeably in the clinical practice. So this quickly ends a real overview of how AS and high-functioning autism are different. Smash the like button, comment below, follow me on my social media sites that are listed below. Feel free, if you haven't done so, you would like to find out more about me, by just clicking on the notification bell to keep up to date with my videos versus subscribing to my channel. As I said, probably as of after New Year's or 2 weeks after New Year's, my schedule will likely to be changed to 3 days a week instead of weekly Monday to Friday. But don't worry, fret, I usually flutter around anyway, hopefully to keep you guys up to date what I get up to anyway. So no further ado, guys, thanks for support, thanks for watching, do what you love what you do. Until next time, Aspie signing out, and I'll see you all again soon. Ciao for now.